Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Zach.
And today we have a special guest with us, my dad, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast.
No problem. And so you might be asking, why are we bringing my dad onto the podcast? Well, we needed an expert for the movie that we were doing, which
And-
is
Planes, trains,
and
Automobiles.
yes,
Group effort.
This movie was directed by John Hughes released in the year 1987. It grossed $49.5 million on a $30 million budget and has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 91%.
It's a movie that should be called A Series of Unfortunate Events, written by John Hughes.
Yes. So John Hughes is one of the most legendary directors of the 1980s. So it was only a matter of time before one of his movies ended up on our podcast. But usually to start off, we do this thing where we do botch, watch, or top notch to consider where in the pantheon of movie history does this movie fall.
Of the three pantheons.
Of the three pantheons. And, botch, just because my dad, he's on the podcast for the first time. So botch would be like, you should never watch this movie in your entire life. It was a complete waste of time. I'm sad that I watched it. A watch would be like, would probably be the most movies might fall into this category. Like, it would be good to watch it, but, it's not going to change your life. And top notch, these are the movies that
Change your life.
change your life, change the way that you live. Maybe not that extreme, but as far as movies can do that to you. So who should we start with?
Let's start with myself. This was... I'm going to have to go with watch for now.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go with watch just because placing it in top notch territory is like.
That's like impeccable writing and everything like that. And this was great. But it's on the borderline for me. So I have to say that it's watch, though. Because I always round down,
What do you think, Dad?
I'm going to say the same thing, watch, because I've had a chance to review this movie over several decades. Matter of fact, I think I might be older than the sum of your last two guests from listeners. So you do get a different perspective watching it at different periods of your life. So I'm actually learning some things now that I didn't know when I first watched this several times back in high school. It did come out when I was in high school.
Yes, I would think that people who had more of an impact when it came out might disagree with us, but I think generally it's like in the upper tier watch territory.
But I don't know. Everybody has their opinions about Star Wars, and
Yeah.
only a certain amount of people have been there since they came out.
That's true.
But everybody
true.
has their opinions about
But
it.
that's Star Wars. That's like a huge brand name.
True. Star Wars is basically politics.
Yes.
It offends people.
Yes. That's all it does. It's only there to sow division.
Yes. Thank you, George Lucas.
Okay, so now we got to get to the plot. So I don't know how we want to do this. We can just kind of start at the beginning. We got this great office meeting, right, where nobody talks the entire time. The boss is sitting there. I've never been in a corporate board meeting like this, but I have to imagine this happens sometimes where you're just in this meeting and nothing is happening. Maybe somebody's still talking, but like you want to leave and everyone's just taking forever.
And it showed his watch at 4:45, and he had plane tickets at 6.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the meeting's, he's already like, I need to go. He gets out, tries to get a taxi, and first he races Kevin Bacon. Weird Kevin Bacon cameo in here. I think he's been in some other John Hughes movies.
Wait, that's weird because we just saw Kevin Bacon in, was it Halloween?
Friday
Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that was like his first big movie. And now this movie
This is
huge role.
second big movie from our
Do you
perspective.
know what movie like Kevin Bacon was like most well known for?
Footloose.
Was it?
Oh,
It must be Footloose. I don't know.
I thought it was Footloose because that's what they reference in the Avengers.
Yeah, that must be it. Or is that Guardians of the Galaxy that they say that?
wasn't
say
Footloose out before this?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. Like he was big. He
Oh,
was
yeah.
already big before this.
I didn't
movie.
watch a ton of movies when I was
Okay.
growing up, so they all kind of flow together right now.
You've probably seen more than one movie.
It's
with
one
Kevin
big
Bacon
movie.
in it.
Yes.
But regardless, he doesn't get the cab, and then his second cab that he had to pay a large sum of money to somebody else to also gets taken by this guy. He tries to stop him, but the cab just takes off.
And he rolls down the window, and you realize it's an SNL skit.
And then, live from New York, it's Saturday night. Okay, not quite. But it is in New York at the time, so it kind of works out. But we get back to the airport, and Steve Martin's character, Neil, who was the guy in the meeting, is sitting across from this guy, and he recognizes him as the guy who stole his cab. And this, we find out later, is a guy named Del Griffith. And
Played by John Candy.
John Candy, yes. And John Candy is obviously flabbergasted that he stole his cab accidentally, and obviously Neil Page is like, there's no way this guy
Come
stole
to think of it, it was a lot easier to get a cab on Madison Avenue this afternoon. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then he offers to buy him a bunch of things, but Neil would just rather not deal with this at this time. They get on the airplane. Neil gets bumped back to from first class to like normal passenger, and he has to sit next to Del on the plane, and this is where he really introduces them.
This is a theme in the movie, bumping into the same people.
Yes. This will not be the first time that Neil runs into Del when he doesn't want to.
Yeah. So then their plane gets delayed, or it doesn't get delayed. They're in the flight. They're on their way to Chicago, but then the Chicago airport shuts down, so they go to, where is it, Mr. St. Hope?
Wichita, Kansas.
Wichita. So yeah, they go to Wichita. And that's where the famous line comes from. Do you know the line?
From the movie?
Yeah. Something of the sorts.
Yeah, he's well, you only see interstate on interstate.
Close. I said, well, that's probably the more mature line that you highlighted. I highlighted the less mature line, which was, we have more luck picking up sticks with our butt cheeks than getting out of here tonight.
Yes.
Oh,
yes. And so that they do go, the interstate on interstate line comes from the taxi ride, where they're in the weirdest taxi I've ever seen. That's like raised as music blaring. And my favorite line from that one goes, John Candy is like, he says the interstate line. He's like, well, why did we have, it's nighttime. We can't even see the town. And he's like, well, he's proud of his town. That's a rare thing these days. This is like such a random thing. But it really tells you a lot about like Del's personality. They get to the hotel and they find out they have to share a hotel room, which provides for many awkward moments.
Oh my goodness.
And after many things that Del has annoyed Neil, he finally has it and blows up in the middle of the night when they're both trying to sleep. And this moment is like, it's a roast, but it turns into like a rant that it's not just a roast, because you have a roast, you roast people about you look funny, whatever. This gets at like the very core of who Del is, and really you can see it in his eyes. This is like amazing acting by John Candy. Like, he tears him to pieces. Like, Del's clearly shattered, and so really good acting on both of their parts. Del is just I think John Candy does a good job just conveying it in his face.
Yeah, because you would have expected him to just kind of jump back on him the other way, and he didn't. He just at some point along that rant, he just started kind of welling up a little bit and stepping back.
Yeah, and he's even admits, like, this is who I am, but he also says, I'm okay with who I am. I'm comfortable in my own shoes.
My wife loves me.
Yes.
She likes who I am.
And so after, but I think Neil starts to feel bad after this answer, after he like Del kind of sticks up for himself. So they go back.
They go back to bed, and then this person comes in their room in the middle of the night and takes the money from their wallets.
Yes. So the money's gone. Immediately, Neil thinks it's Del. It's not, because Del's wallet has also been stolen. So they have to somehow get to the train station, which they do through Gus, who owns the hotel. His son comes to pick them up. And that is a memorable scene.
Owen, right?
Yeah, Owen. Owen is one of he kind of steals the spotlight in this scene with he spits on his hand before shaking Neil's hand, and then he introduces his wife, and she's like, I don't know, just this very stoic, serious lady. But they eventually get to the train station, and then the train breaks down, of course, and then they have to take the train to the bus stop. And they go on the bus where we get.
Well, they have to walk to.
They have to walk a mile and a half.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and they get to the to the bus, and that takes them to the rental car place. But Neil's assigned car isn't there, but Del's is. So then, is it Dale or Dell?
Dell.
Dell,
It's
yeah.
Dell.
And so, then Neil's attitude is pretty bad. So he goes and says some nasty words to the front desk lady, and then he doesn't.
All
end
she
up,
wants is to just get ambrosia for her.
gobble gobble.
Gobble.
And this bad attitude ends up getting him punched on the street, and then he falls into the street, and then lo and behold, he almost gets hit by a car, or does
Which
he?
is
Yeah, no,
which
he
is
almost-
almost the second time, because when he was chasing the cab in the,
Yeah,
in
he
the
falls in
opening
the
scene, he
street.
fell
Yeah.
in front of the.
So more repetition. Repetition is apparently not the mother of learning in this movie. And so then he finally goes and he gets in the car with Dell because Dell has gotten his rental car, and so then they're just road tripping it.
But then they drive on the wrong side of the road. There's a whole thing with that, and
The
they get
car
close to
explodes.
dying. The car catches on fire. His wallet was in there. Everything's just destroyed. They end up making amends again in the motel, and then they accidentally back up and destroy a whole wall in the hotel with the car. And then they get pulled over, and then their car got impounded, and then they had to go into a semi-truck, and then they had to go on a train. And then while they're on the train, it's the end of the movie. And Neil is thinking to himself. He's reminiscing. He's thinking about
Well, he has left
Thanksgiving.
Dell behind him at this point.
Yeah, they parted ways. And then he thinks back, like, to all the little things that Dell had said, and then goes back and realizes that Dell has nowhere to go.
And I think one of the key words that Dell said was they were eating at a restaurant, and he says, "I haven't been home in years." Mm-hmm. And then
Kind of just shrugs it
and
off.
then he's like, "Oh, that's just a figure of speech." Mm-hmm. But Neil putting the pieces together and like, wait, this guy's story doesn't add up.
Yeah, so he goes back to the station and finds out that his wife died 8 years ago, and then he invites him to her house, and that's it. That's the end of the movie.
That's the end of the movie. But it's a very heartwarming end because Neil finally, embraces that this Dell guy needs him and is needs him at this moment.
And then there's kind of a story woven through of Neil's wife trying to figure out where he is, and he's missing this Thanksgiving stuff, and she seems a little upset. And that might be harder for you guys to relate to because today we have cell phones and trackers and all this stuff. I mean, you had pay phones, so when he was in Wichita, you're just at the mercy of when you can get to a phone to call. So
Our generation relies on
the
Steve
generation
Jobs.
loses that kind of maybe feeling she had.
And it's interesting. I don't know if you know this, Zach, but they're making a remake of this movie.
Really?
With guess who the actors are?
The same?
No, Will Smith and Kevin Hart.
Oh my
In a remake
goodness.
of this movie. Maybe we'll talk about that later, though. That could distract us.
That's so different.
Yeah,
They don't have
there's
the same...
so many things that they'll have to do differently in this movie.
Whoa. Okay.
But for right now, let's go to Outsider Review because you can always be a pessimist.
You can always.
And Janet Maslin in 2003 was a pessimist. She wrote for the New York Times. She just says, this film does have its scattered moments, but too often the audience has as much a reason as Dell and Neil to wonder where, if anywhere, they're going. I didn't really understand that review, or that criticism, because, I mean, that's the whole point of the movie, is that they don't know where they're going, because they do know where they're going, but they don't know how they're going to get there all the time, because things keep going wrong.
Yeah, every time that something wrong happens, you kind of just have to laugh. And I feel like you kind of go on a journey with the characters because at first you're like getting a little, you're probably like a little, as a viewer, you're a little stressed out by what's happening, And then all of a sudden you just keep going, and then something bad happens, and you start to laugh. And then that's what they're doing in the movie too. Like when the later bad things happen, they just laugh, or they just leave the site and they're like, let's just go. So
Yeah. But boy, if these guys would have had travel insurance, I think this movie would have been a lot different. Lost bags, delayed flights, burn up cars, canceled hotel rooms.
even the conductors with their burn up train.
Yeah, the burn up train. You might need train insurance in this movie. If you tried to keep track of how many different types of insurance you could possibly use in this movie, like rental
Did
insurance.
you say life insurance?
Life insurance
Yeah.
in some instances, theft insurance. Well, I think you should call the guys at Hedman Anglin Agency if you have any problems that were like those in this movie. HAA is well known for saving people money on auto, home, and business insurance. And they would also like to help you out with travel insurance if that's a concern of yours too. So if you want any more information on this, call 614-486-7300. That's 614-486-7300. And if you do contact them, always make sure to mention that Ben and Zach sent you.
Yes, we send you into the wilderness. Go.
Go forth.
My flock.
Hopefully when you're going, you don't like meet somebody on an airplane that you don't want to meet and end up in some random hotel room in Wichita. But we send you anyway.
Or you could do that and have
Or you
someone
could just
join your family.
call them. That would be easier.
Yes.
So now we're getting to the scores.
Yes. Let's do that.
Let's do that.
So Ben and I will say ours, and then Mr. Stanhope will do the final stamp to see who's right.
And I might even go
Add
who
on.
I'm closer to.
Yeah, definitely. He'll add some things into it, especially in this category. So the first category we always do is sentiment. How did this movie make you feel, kind of?
I gave that a 7. I enjoyed this movie. It is my first time watching it, and I know everybody's probably thinking, wow, Zach, you should have seen it sooner. But no, this is the first time that I watched it, and I really enjoyed it. So I gave it a 7, which is solid.
I gave it a 9, but I
Whoa.
think the reason that I bumped it higher was because my whole life, even before I watched this movie, I'd always heard quotes from the movie. My dad told us scenes from the movie before we even watched it, and then we finally watched it and we got to see all the scenes, and they were even better than than the tellings of the scenes, which sometimes people tell things in movies, the scene's better, and then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, that was actually kind of disappointing. But this lived up to expectations and some. So that's probably why I have a sentimental attachment to this movie.
Well, and obviously I wouldn't be here if I didn't like this movie.
Yeah.
It was a favorite of some friends in high school, especially a shout out to my second cousin, Shane. We grew up watching this several times a year, I think, and probably quoting it a lot to each other in class when we should have been studying. And so obviously it brings me back to a time that doesn't seem so long ago. So that's why it would be a high sentiment for me, and I'll get into more of Shane sent some comments. We'll get into more of those as we go through these.
All right. So obviously we got Zach's he doesn't have the whole sentimental attachment, but enough to even give it a 7. But now we got to go into message.
All right. I give it an 8. I think that there's two different people came together, obviously opposites, and they are fighting the entire movie. And these aren't like the regular, like the buddy cop movie where they're just like talking to each other and then they argue a little bit, or they have one problem. No, they cut deep. They go deep into these characters and find out like psychologically what's wrong with them and why they're not patient with each other or why they're fighting. But then at the end, they just kind of realize that they were both put in this bad situation and they might as well go through it together. So I think that was a good message. So I gave it an 8. What about you, Ben?
I also gave it an 8 because this movie is just it gets a lot deeper than you expect it to. There's so many goofy scenes in this movie that you could take away, but nothing in this movie. Everything in this movie builds up to the tension between the characters and finally what they learn from each other. Because as much as you sympathize with Dell because of his life situation, you also realize he's not that much of a thoughtful person. You know, he's pretty messy. He's not really considering other people's. He kind of takes advantage of Neil's generosity, even if Neil's kind of cold about everything and not necessarily a nice person. Like I said, Neil is not super nice. He's very tight. He doesn't want other people's lives to get mixed up in his life. And so they both kind of learn things from each other. And then through all this experience, they actually form like an authentic friendship bond somehow by the end of the movie.
Yeah, and I originally, when I saw this movie, I don't think I would have thought deeply about the message. The first time I watched it with Ben, I saw him react to, there's a period at the end of the movie after they sort of get to an understanding with each other and get a little more on the same page, and it starts to get slow. And I saw Ben kind of, as the movie ended and the story unfolded, kind of get caught up in the story, and I had never got that because it just got slow after all the laughs of these characters in conflict. And I think this is where we got some feedback from Shane, and he kind of summed it up because I shared that experience with him. But he said we lost interest because we're used to kind of the happy endings and the laughing. So like you mentioned, as a young teen who was looking for laughs and hadn't lived long enough to see growth, have empathy, or read deeper meaning, or learn a life lesson that everyone was worth, and some have suffered tragedy and causes them to appear odd to others who are too proud to get to know someone before judging them. So I thought that was a really good way to sum it up, and I guess you guys are ahead of where I was when I was younger, because I didn't catch that message because I was so caught up in the laughs.
We wouldn't have without the 10-point system that we created.
Sometimes you have to force yourself to think. And I think that does really sum it up well, because the whole empathy side of things, where Neil sees this guy, he's weird, he's socially awkward, he's not like, he doesn't get all the cues that Neil is used to in his corporate world where people act a certain way. And so he just assumes that he's just, trying to annoy him or something. He assumes kind of the worst about him. And then he finds out all these things eventually that have caused... And, I mean, this guy is a shower ring salesman. I mean, he's not going places in life. And so... But he just doesn't see behind the curtain.
But on the other hand, he also is very, kind of street smart, because Neil gets all upset and frustrated and calling home, and he's taking the next step, the next idea. He's the one that initiates a lot of the next steps. Okay, this didn't work. What are we going to do now?
Yeah, he knows a lot of people too. Like, he actually did sell shower rings. He's not lying about that. He walks into the hotel, and the guy's like, "Oh, Dell, it's great to see you." Like, he's been to Wichita before. He's been around places, and he's able to, kind of form trust, and he's a likable guy, I guess, to some people, maybe not somebody like Neil, but enough. And then he's like, when the shower rings don't work, he sells them as earrings, which can be a little bit grimy, but he's a hustler, he's trying to do whatever he can to, get friendship with Neil.
And it does make sense in hindsight, because he says at the end of the movie that he doesn't have a home, so he doesn't have anywhere to go. And I'm assuming that big trunk that he was carrying the whole movie might have been all of his stuff.
Yes, there's lots of theories about that trunk, but that's probably the most likely one.
Yeah. Also, do we want to talk about that scene at the end between the Mrs. Page and what's his face?
Dell.
That it seems like they knew each other right at the end.
Huh. That, I'm guessing that scene where he walks, Neil introduces him like, "I would like you to meet a friend," and his wife goes, "Hi, Mr. Griffith," or Dell Griffith, and he goes, "Hi, Mrs. Page." Wow, I really butchered that. But point being, like, how did she even know his last name? I don't remember him mentioning that. Could have been in a deleted scene that she mentioned it. Could have just been bad acting.
Mm-hmm. And there probably was things going on in the story that we didn't see. Like there probably were some phone calls and things. So maybe she did know. But it was sort of awkward, because it was almost. It's always been awkward to me. It makes a little more sense with the story and maybe her being worried.
Yeah.
But. It did seem like she kind of knew him from somewhere else.
Yeah. That's just kind of a weird quirk. So plot, we've talked a lot about it. What I gave it an 8. What'd you give it?
An 8.
And yeah, it's a well thought out movie. There's actually lots of points where there's something that you don't think is important, and good movies do this. Every action that's not important ends up being important at some point. He puts his wallet in the car. You're like, oh, why did he mention that? Well, later in the movie, that's important.
But it's the type of movie where little small things like that, you realize, like, this is the type of movie that will call back to that, so I'm going to pay attention to that. So.
Oh, so like they showed the trunk appeared in the movie before the character of Dell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a Dell P. Griffith. Yeah. We're paying close attention. Obviously, most people who hadn't seen the movie probably didn't know that trunk was going to be important. But
that he checked the watch at the beginning of the movie when he was trying to get out of there.
I didn't even notice that.
When he was trying to get out of his meeting, and then he uses the watch to buy his hotel room.
Right, and then there are several times after he gives the watch for the hotel room that he tries to find the time, and again, we don't have cell phones. Yeah. He doesn't have a watch. He doesn't know what time it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've talked a lot about the plot, but Lowe's, the attention to detail in this movie is, I don't know that attention to detail is particularly something that John Hughes is known for, actually, because I've heard things like he would write scripts on the back of napkins in bars and stuff, which wouldn't necessarily make you think that somebody was gonna like.
That's how the song "Walk This Way" was made, on the back of a napkin.
Yeah,
I guess there's no back of a napkin.
Yeah, I guess it's just a napkin.
Yeah.
So he would write it on a napkin. I think this script was. He was very intentional about this one because he's did a lot of like he did The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, kind of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, movies that were about teenagers, and he created this whole. It's like legendary. Like people talk about Hughes, like how he influenced the way that people thought of like high school movies.
And like
stuff.
Quentin Tarantino, he has his favorite actors because a lot of the actors from Ferris Bueller are in this movie as well.
He's created his own universe, sort of, that was based around Chicago, this where they're trying to get to in this movie. But he wrote this one about adults, and it got an R rating, which was only basically because of one scene, but it showed that he was doing something that he was trying to be more mature in. Not necessarily that getting an R rating makes you any more thoughtful than any other rating. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm just saying he was aiming this at adults, where most of his other movies were sort of aimed at teenagers.
Mm-hmm. I did not realize that. Yeah.
And, well, now character arcs.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit, but we didn't go into detail about Neil or...
We talked about John Hughes' character arc in real life.
Yeah, but Neil obviously is the stickler. He's the guy that, like you said, doesn't want to get his life mixed up in the other guys. What's his name? I forget again.
Dell. That's a weird name.
Yes. And in the end, he learns to love him. He learns to keep forgiving, and he ends up getting what he wants at the end of the movie, but it's after a lot of hardships. So, and then Dell, he's kind of the same, but he learns at the end that like he's messing up a lot. He's causing this guy harm so much when he's in that car and it's snowing, and so then he kind of learns to be a little bit more thoughtful in the end. So.
Yeah, I think that sums up pretty well. They're like two opposite people who learn the strengths and weaknesses or learn from the strengths of the other person, and also learn from the weaknesses of themselves.
Mm-hmm. I gave it an 8, and I think Ben did too.
Yes,
Boy, this is going to be hard to side with one of you if you keep having the same rating.
That's true. The past two movies we've had very close ratings.
But the other thing about this movie, not with the main characters, but all the characters they ran into, they were all kind of believably real in the jobs they were performing. So I was kind of impressed with that. The lady behind the counter at the car rental place, and the guy out, with the taxi at the airport, and
they were all kind of different caricatures, but they were characters that like, oh, this is a person who lives here.
Yeah.
How they would act like.
Yeah, like the flight attendant.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Like you might encounter that on like favoritism on a plane, stuff like that. Yeah. So then we get into cinematography, which isn't as exciting. I give it a 7 because I don't really find anything striking, but I don't find anything that's horrible. I just give it a 7. But
the same situation for me. I gave it a 6, though. I guess my tendency is to just go lower than that.
That's true. I guess it is. Zach's more of a pessimist. We've already talked about that many times.
Yeah.
There's just, of all the things I would think about this movie, I would never think about like how cinematic or like it's serviceable for what the movie needs. Mm-hmm. It's nothing more.
Yeah, I particularly like the part where he doesn't have the key. He has keys, but the car isn't there, and he has to walk back to the airport. And they show him kind of walking down the highway and across the tarmac with the plane landing. Those
were surreal scenes.
There's a few good shots like that when they're walking across the field.
Yeah.
From the bus. Those are definitely the shots that.
Did you mention that them taking his stuff off the highway too? I thought that scene was pretty surreal too.
Yeah.
When it hit like the big chest, they're taking it and the cars are driving by, and it's just a long scene of them dragging it off. And I thought that was cool too.
Yeah, I mean, it's the middle of the night. There's no flares, no hazard lights.
Mm-hmm.
they're in the middle of the highway.
Yeah.
All right, originality.
I gave it a 6. Not because it's not original, even though this is originality, but just because I've seen those series of events movies a lot.
Yeah, I'm thinking of my score, and I'm like, I gave it an 8, but I wasn't thinking about how, yes, this is not probably the first movie that had a series of events that kept going downhill, that style of movie. I mean, we watched one of those. Good Time was like that.
Or Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yeah, where just things keep going worse and worse and worse. But the thing that's original to me about this is how it's like there you don't get too many of these like travel movies where I don't know, I've never really seen this scenario in another movie. And also combined with John Hughes's sort of like fringe reality, like there's things that happen that are like over the edge of reality, like when he wrecks into the cars and then you see this scene where like they turn into skeletons and then John Candy turns into the devil.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like there's things that happen that are like kind of cartoonish.
Yeah.
But you never question the reality of the movie, even though like you don't look at it as like a goofy. It's not like Spaceballs or something.
It's kind of incorporating what he might be going through his mind, because like when he first recognized him in the airport, it shows him thinking, and then it shows the taxi cab door.
Right. So it like goes in and out of his mind occasionally.
Yeah. So that helps you place it too.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other scene that was kind of like cartoony. I mean, it wasn't really a scene. It's just the idea that they were driving the car after it was completely on fire.
Yeah.
It's
like
the headlights
would that
still
car
work.
really be drivable? Probably not.
And they were sitting on these burnt, melted seats and somehow not dying. So
there was actually a lot of situations where they were driving places in very frigid and cold conditions. That happened like 3 times in the movie.
yeah.
So how about acting?
I gave acting an 8.
I gave acting a 9.
Ooh.
Well, John Candy is the person I'm thinking of because I think he probably gave the best. I would guess this is the best acting he's ever done in his career. I haven't watched every John Candy movie, but this is pretty impressive. Like, I've heard people say Steve Martin possibly could be replaceable. I'm kind of like, I still think Steve Martin did such a good job with this role that I don't necessarily see that him being replaced by anyone. But John Candy probably could not be replaced. He's probably the only person who could pull off a role like that.
Chris Farley.
I don't think Chris Farley could have done it. Like, he's just not the same, like, as an actor.
Chris Farley might not have as much gravitas.
No.
Yeah, and I think John Candy could look like a real everyday person, not just a total goofball. And sometimes what we see out of Chris Farley is you get typecast into a certain everyday, but Dell could relate to people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I heard this also said about Dell. Dell is a heavier set guy, but that's never once used in the movie as a style of humor. So often those heavier set funny guys, that's like their whole bit that, and it's not always their fault. This like gets written into the movie, but they actually made a point to not do that in the movie because he's a heavier guy, but he's not somebody that you wouldn't run into. And so I think that actually plays to a strength of the movie, that they're not relying on sort of a like lower tier humor.
That's a good point. I never thought of that.
Same.
Yeah, I think I heard that from another podcast. I don't know which one, but shouts out to the person who did that.
We
who
copyright
made that
it.
point.
We copyright it right here, right now. That's us.
So style.
I gave style a 7.
I also gave style a 7. It's got the John Hughes kind of style like stamped on it.
It's a funny Christmas/Thanksgiving movie.
Yeah. Well, why did it be
I don't
Christmas?
know. It's snowing. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're in Ohio. It doesn't snow on
places were decorated. You know, they were traveling home for Thanksgiving, but I think there was Christmas lights in the one
Oh,
hotel.
Yeah,
and
you're right. Yeah, you can definitely see this like a holiday movie, sort of like just that theme. It doesn't necessarily have throughout the movie, but there's different parts that point to it, like
I'm
being
assuming
with family and
it
stuff.
could be a movie where like once you watch it, you start the Christmas season. You know, like
Yeah.
you watch it like, oh, it's Thanksgiving. Let's watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles so that we can start Christmas season.
Because think about how many Thanksgiving movies there are. I can't think of any besides Freebirds, and that movie wasn't very good.
Why did Freebirds come to your mind?
I just watched it recently. Owen Wilson and Woody Harrelson are turkeys who go back in time to save turkeys from being served on Thanksgiving platters. Oh my. It's pretty bad. If you want to be mildly entertained by the goofiest plot, and it's thoughtfully done with the time travel part, weirdly enough. Like, it doesn't really make sense, but it's anyway.
Doesn't Mr. Peabody and Sherman go back to Thanksgiving?
They probably do.
But that's not a Thanksgiving movie.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is this is probably head and shoulders over any other Thanksgiving movie.
I really can't think of one, which is strange because I feel like there's something out there, you know?
There's probably a Thanksgiving horror movie.
There's probably a bunch
like
of those.
the turkey comes to life or something and kills everyone.
Yeah, maybe.
if there isn't, we should do that as our first movie.
Yes, Movie Vault sponsored movie. And we rate it 100%.
We're like, I've never seen a better movie than this.
It's our first 100% rating. Rated by us. Okay.
So now to score. The soundtrack. Mostly the soundtrack. There's a few actually of them singing in this movie every once in a while. 3 coins in a fountain.
Do you know that song?
I actually don't know that song, no. But apparently nobody else on the bus did either.
Yeah,
It's okay,
I mean,
relate
it's
to the bus
definitely
people.
an older song, but it kind of showed the difference between the characters because I think the characters are probably pretty close in age, like in the movie supposed to be.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not like you have an older guy and a younger guy where the older guy is going to go to the old. It's just kind of the world they live in.
Yeah, and it's funny because this is like he's actually putting himself out there. Steve Martin or Neil, which he doesn't do a lot in the movie, and when he finally does it, it's like he's met with embarrassment.
Hold on. There was one thing that you guys mentioned, that Ben mentioned in the movie. Right when they part ways the first time, Neil and Dell, he talks to the girl sitting next to him on the train, and he doesn't go out of his way to talk to people. He even says that in one of his
He's
things.
like so happy that Dell's not with him that all of a sudden he's like Dell has rubbed off onto him, and he's like, this girl. I mean, she's like talking to him, but she doesn't seem like super interested.
Going
in
back for
talking
the
to him.
holidays? Yep. And he just smiles at her. It's a little creepy, but like, it just
But
doesn't fit his character.
You can see the joy of not being around Dell in his eyes, which is kind of sad, but it's like
Poor Dell.
good acting at the same time because he probably is thinking that as his character is supposed to be thinking that.
Well, and then the score, they had a constant the little tune that played every time something bad happened, and,
Right.
and I do that in my head, from watching this movie so much. I go to the mailbox and get a bill out, and it's da 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 da.
Yeah, I give the score an 8.
Foreclosure.
Yeah. So it's kind of
That's funny.
let you process the moment and move on. It's not very long.
Yeah. I think I noticed the soundtrack more in this movie the second time I watched it. Like I didn't really remember that from the first time I watched this movie, but the soundtrack actually adds a lot to the movie in terms of like, I don't know. There's just a lot of it's kind of a funky soundtrack, but it works. So that's
Yeah,
why
and
I give it
there's
an 8.
another thing you would relate to. I really like the techno version of Red River Valley, when they're kind of free-spirited and riding the car. So when you're young and you first get your driver's license, that's what you feel like. Shane and I, we looked for every used music place to look for the cassette of the soundtrack. It was so hard to find. I finally had a friend that found it at the college I went to, at one of the stores around there, but she found it first.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I got to listen to it, but now it's on Spotify.
Yes, the wonders of modern technology that also ruined the plot of this movie. But
Yes.
all right, so what'd you give score?
I gave score a 7.
7.
I thought it was solid.
Solid.
They're making my job really easy.
Yeah.
Not
I'm
having to
disagreeing
pick
too
one or
much.
the other. Yeah.
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 All right, finally choreography. I gave it an 8.
I gave it a 6.
I thought the physical comedy was good, but
There wasn't much.
I guess you're right. I mean, I'm more thinking of
The punch.
yeah, I guess you're right. There's not really a lot. So maybe I overrated the
Maybe choreography in plot devices, like maybe
Yeah.
the car scenes and like different
Or
things
I'm
like that.
also thinking of the facial expressions and stuff.
Like,
that.
look at the choreography and his lips moving right now. Wow.
Well, I just thought both the actors did a really good job with that, but maybe that's overstepping the bounds of choreography a little bit.
Every molecule that moves is choreography.
So what was your final score?
My final score was a 71%. Da-na-na-na-na.
My final score was an 80%.
What? Did we just break an? Oh, you've already broken an 80.
I've already broken 80. Zach's never done it, I don't think. I think he gave a 79 once.
So what is yours?
But we really need to update
80?
our list.
So our average is gonna be a what? 75.5.
75.5, yep. So that's pretty good, pretty solid movie in our upper echelon of movies. And yeah, I think that's what it deserves.
Yeah. I am interested. I don't know what we have next, but I am interested. What else Shane wrote on the thing?
I don't know. Did you? He had a lot. I mean, he. There's a lot of one-liners in here that you could keep using. He wrote some of them. I have one of them. Like when he's getting the cab, he offers the guy $50, and the guy says, "Well, anybody that would pay $50 for a cab would surely pay $75."
And it's like,
He's
yeah,
like,
people
not
are-
necessarily.
He says, "Can I appeal to your good nature?" He goes, "I don't have a good nature."
Yeah. And then, after they get into go between the two semis in the car, he says, "Can we could laugh about it now? We're okay." Neil wasn't quite to that point.
Oh yeah, it's just a couple dents.
So-
I can push this one out.
Yeah. Yes. So we've used those lines, and like the kids have heard those because it's one of those movies, and I've seen it on other actors. The thing about the how about those bears?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
one was awkward. That one made
Yeah.
me because
After
that
the
happens
awkward-
in real life.
After the awkward moment, and so
Then
I've
they
seen that
just try to
repeated in other
Change
things.
the subject.
It's exactly like when something awkward happens or there's a quiet spot, and then they just go, "Oh, how about that weather?" or something like that. So
And I think looking at this email, I noticed in one of his first paragraphs, Shane talks about how John Hughes has a thread that's in all of his movies where there's like a character or characters in the movie who are like bullied or marginalized by society or looked down upon. And I'm thinking back to all of them I watched, and I'm like, yeah, in a way that's true. Like you got Dell, he's weird, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's Ferris's friend, I forget what his name is, but he's sort of like the like uptight character that Ferris has to loosen up. And I think The Breakfast Club is about like these four people who are stereotyped in high school, and they like kind of come together. I've never actually watched the movie though, so I need to come back to that one. But it's interesting because that was like kind of the mark. He was kind of looking up for the person who's kind of the low person on the totem pole throughout his career. Now, there's some unrealistic things about how he did his movies that people eventually like turned upon in some ways with movies like I've actually watched two movies recently that would probably be like the antithesis to John Hughes' style, which would be Heathers, which is a dark comedy high school movie that's about like how kind of like high schoolers are like not that great of people. And there's probably a lot of other things that you can dig up in the movie, or how and that's also about people who are downtrodden, but it takes a different angle. And then Dazed and Confused, which I think is like a realistic portrayal of high school where there's not necessarily everybody in these rigid caste systems. This is actually, I'm realizing this is like really kind of off topic, but because there's nobody in high school who's in this movie. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that John Hughes, but to be somebody who makes such a category that somebody has to make an antithesis to that category is pretty impressive, right?
Yep, yeah, that is good. I agree.
Yes.
I also think, just quickly, I think it's really cool that it's like a generation that watches the movie with their friends in high school, and then now we're watching it, but we're not. I mean, we're kind of in high school. We're like in.
Oh no, you guys,
college, yeah.
you are college age now.
Yeah,
Yeah, we gotta
You're
find
at
other
the-
movies to watch.
yeah, but like it is kind of cool that like it can kind of pass down like that, because there aren't many movies that would stick out enough to be like memorable enough, I guess, to
And
passed down.
You
like
probably saw more payphones in that movie than you've seen your whole life.
that is
Yeah.
very true. Yes.
And then I guess we'd also, just getting back to Shane. Shane is from the state of Utah, so we
Yeah.
want to make sure we give him an official shout out.
Yes, shout out to Shane. This was when my dad was gonna email him and ask him, about this movie. He went way above and beyond what I was expecting. Like, he wrote some very impressive things, and he's
Yeah.
obviously clearly thought a lot about this movie. And I thought
Yeah,
that's
no,
really
I
impressive.
mean, really, even more than I had. I was very impressed too.
Yeah, it's very
'Cause,
well written.
he-
Maybe he thought we were
I
more
think-
professional than we are.
Yeah,
Well, I tried to build you guys up.
Ah, thank you.
yeah. So Shane, if you're listening, thank you very much. This is definitely very helpful content
Actually,
that
yes.
we've been able to use. So now we have to go to Brita moments, which you probably won't get why we named it that. There's this, we both watched this show called Community, and there's this character named Brita who's she's not
Horrible.
She's a horrible character, and the show the show knows that the character is horrible, and so they use that as a joke throughout the movie. And so then for plot holes and things we don't like, we call it Brita moments.
There were just a couple parts where I could tell there was a deleted scene. Specifically, we talked about the shower. There was a scene where he comes out of the shower, and there's a big mess there. And I'm assuming that that Dell came in there and messed it up or something like that. And then they mention while they're going to bed that some beer spilled in the part where Neil was sleeping, and they didn't show that. So I'm just assuming that they filmed that or had that in the script or some sort, but they just didn't get it into the final cut.
Yeah, there's probably we talked about the end scene, being weird, but there's a few things that don't make a ton of sense, but there's nothing too major.
And nothing takes away from the movie in any way.
And everything that's sort of unrealistic is like adds to like the funniness of the movie, and it's a movie, so you're allowed to sort of expand your imagination. You want to be entertained too. So I think that mostly it does a pretty good job. So there's not too much to complain about it, but just a few minor nitpicks that probably come down to editing mostly.
Anything that happened that was sort of a surprise was definitely believable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, stock market. So this is where we take the actors and from the movie and the director and the production company and anybody, and you could even take a character in the movie, in which case that would be a bad investment because there was never.
I'm investing in the makeup artists.
In the makeup artist. No, what John Candy. So if you would have invested in him, I think he made Uncle Buck, but unfortunately he passed away pretty young, I believe, from I think it was a heart disease. So that's actually kind of sad. I think actually after John, that might have actually affected John Hughes, because he kind of retired soon after that happened, from my understanding. I mean, so there's a lot of things. John Hughes, it would still be a good investment because he wrote Home Alone, which was a huge sensation of a movie that made a ton of money. Probably one of the most well-known Christmas movies. Probably the biggest Christmas movie, honestly.
That or It's a Wonderful Life.
No, the biggest Christmas movie since I can't think of a Christmas movie since that movie came out that's bigger.
Not at all. Besides,
so It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street are obviously huge movies that were important, and maybe even bigger.
No, Star Wars. Star Wars came out on Christmas.
Die Hard. Well, Die Hard came out before.
I'm joking.
So this guy did a lot of important things, but I think that would be his most culturally recognizable, even though he didn't direct it. So if he bought it and stock in him, like it would be a good investment.
It is hard to tell with older movies that where different actors.
Well, especially when you know what happened pretty definitively.
Mm-hmm.
Like for most of these people, you know where their careers went, and they're probably not going much further if they're still alive. Like Steve Martin's still alive, and he's probably still doing stuff, right? But
he's old.
He did
he's much
Pink
older.
Panther, he did some stuff, but this is kind of the prime of his career, probably.
Also, wait, quickly, there was a scene where they're singing on the bus and they sing the Flintstones, which is exactly what they do in The Office in one scene where they get the work bus and they sing the Flintstones. And Wilma is sung by by Dell, and Wilma at the end is sung by Michael Scott in The Office. Just a funny thing.
So there's quite a possibility that scene in The Office was directly influenced by this movie, because The Office would be a show that the writers would be smart enough to be able to like make these like really subtle,
And they do every time I watch it. Okay, anyway, sorry, we're running out of time. I would probably invest in John Candy at this time.
Yeah.
Unknowing that he does pass away,
I think he still does Uncle Buck after this, right?
I believe that
Uncle
was
Buck
after.
is after this movie. So
just based on that,
like
and SNL and everything, I would definitely invest in him. I would invest in Steve Martin too. He has that main character face.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think this was a bit of a character swap, or not swap, but like I think generally Steve Martin is like a goofier sort of character who does these weird facial expressions. Like the only other thing I have to compare it to is I think I watched part of the Pink Panther, and that movie he's like incredibly goofy. You're like, you wouldn't even recognize him as the guy from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but.
And he was in Father of the Bride, and so he was the.
Was he sort of straight-laced in that movie?
No,
too?
well, probably not, because he was the one that was having a hard time with his daughter getting married, and
right.
So he was probably portrayed as not as different of a character, but that would have been not the straight man character.
Yeah, I always think it's the mark of a good actor, somebody who they're typecast, but then when they're given an opportunity to go out of the role that they're typically in, they like perform really well. So like when Jim Carrey in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Uncut Gems, when Adam Sandler is in like a non-comedic role, those are like two guys who are so like Steve Martin's kind of doing the same thing here in this movie, even though this is still a comedy. He's probably mostly in comedy.
Yeah, and he does it a lot with facial expressions and
right. And he
like
still
Steve Carell
he
in
still
Welcome to
does
Marwen.
some of the things that he's known for, but he does it in a different context. So I think that's just the mark of a good actor. And John Candy obviously he kind of does the same thing in every movie, but he does it so well that you can't really argue with his talent. All right. Well, I think we are kind of down to the final conclusions of this movie. So I think I would just say there's a lot to be learned from this movie, especially when you're young. You can kind of see like it's you could draw some extrapolations on whether Neil was like kind of taking his family for granted. You know, he said he spent a lot of time away from them, and being around Dell, who had lost his family, and he was like, wow, these people are really important. Dell, you know, has a picture of his wife still, but his wife is dead, and he's just thinking about, you know, how he would like to be with his wife again. So that when Neil finally makes it home, he realizes how much he loves his family. That's just like one thing you can take from this movie.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the message overall was very good. And it's definitely one of those movies that you can rewatch once a year before Christmas to start off the season. So I think it's like a Home Alone where you can almost just like see these series of funny events, and then at the end it goes into the heart and they learn a lesson. And I like it because we learned some history about it from back in the Mr. Stanhope's day when he was
back when it actually came out, because you do have a little bit different perspective.
Yeah.
When a movie you're watching an old movie but you're young, and so like you have no context for like what it meant to people when they were first watching it.
Right, and yeah, the fact that you can talk about it across the generations, I mean, just with a little bit of context, you can still, you know, makes it that much more depth to the movie.
Yeah.
You were probably watching this movie a while back, and you never think that you'd be in the basement with your son making a podcast about it.
Like,
One day.
that is kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy.
I remember in high school we used to hang out in basements like this.
And one day Ben will be on a podcast talking about this movie with his son.
Yeah,
Maybe so.
And you know, I should get extra credit for staying awake through the whole movie because middle-aged men have the reputation for Friday night. You sit back and you fall asleep.
Oh yeah, the early weekend. You got to start it. Yep.
All right. Well, we have to do our social media plugs first. So, if you like this movie, then tell us why you liked it, and if you didn't like it, tell us why you didn't like it. Email us at themovievaultpod@gmail.com. And then the Movie Vault Pod, or at the Movie Vault Pod, is our Instagram, and then at Movie Vault Pod, is Twitter, and that's just because Twitter limits how many characters you can have. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah, thank you.
If you know Jack Dorsey, tell him that I'm annoyed.
Yes. Or if you're listening.
Or Jack Dorsey, if you're listening to us.
Also, please sponsor us.
Yes. Twitter is now sponsoring the Movie Vault. So the next movie we're doing, I think, is Polar Express, right? Is that what we decided?
Yes.
Yes.
We're doing Polar Express next week, and we'll have a guest on. We're still figuring out the details, so let's not say who it is yet.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. So it's now time to close the vault. It's been a good time having my dad on the podcast.
Thank you. Yes.
Hopefully this won't be the last time he's on. And we also shout out to Hedman Anglin Agency. Through their sponsorship, they provided us with an extra mic that we're using for our guest, and it's very nice.
A very high quality mic.
Especially since I could now sit in a lazy boy.
Yeah,
we're very asleep.
Yeah, and it allows us, when we have three people, to not get all worried about who's, because it's hard to fit three people around a mic on one couch. So yeah, we're very thankful to Hedman Anglin Agency. Definitely call them if you have any insurance needs. So, time to close the vault now?
Let's do it. We haven't done it in a while, Ben.
All right. Time to get back in.
All right.
Boy, my dogs are barking tonight.